Big November. I tell you what, there is no boring time in the Missouri General Assembly. That has certainly been the case the last few weeks. We brought you Speaker Plocker. Last week we brought you Representative Jeff Knight. This week we're going to bring you a guy running for Secretary of State from St. Charles County, Representative Adam Swadron. Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics Midweek Update.
Good morning, and thank you for having me, Scott.
Okay, you had mentioned to me you'd kick this around for a while. I know Secretary of State. Folks might have been surprised, but not if they were talking to you. I know you've been thinking about this. What made you pull the trigger on running for Secretary of State?
Well, I got to say, I've always been interested and involved with the elections process. Way back when, I worked for a company that sold the Palm Pilot electronic poll book lookup software.
Gosh, you went Palm Pilot. You skipped BlackBerry. You went right to Palm Pilot. I remember that.
Yeah, that was way back when.
My first eBay purchase was a Palm Pilot.
Oh, wow.
And I realized really quickly I didn't have enough things to do to use it, so I just carried it around.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was a great tool for the election authorities across the country to be able to look up people instead of having to call the office to determine whether or not they were voting at the correct location or where they even needed to go. So I had that. I also, even before that, I had lobbied on behalf of the Associated Students in the University of Missouri. And the issue that I had back then in 2003 was elections, and that was during the implementation of the Help America Vote Act. So I've always had that interest in elections. And when I finally got elected to the House there in 2020, one of the first committees I requested to be on was the Elections Committee. And you can ask anyone that I serve with on that committee how involved and detail oriented I am when it comes to that. And so naturally, there was always the talk about is Ashcroft going to run for governor? And lo and behold, he does, and that frees it up. And there were a lot of people asking me, hey, are you going to run for this? And the thought of running a statewide campaign just a few months ago seemed very daunting, but the encouragement that I've gotten from a lot of people has definitely encouraged me that I've made the right decision in running for this.
I remember there was a time back in the day, it was long, as Meatloaf would say, long ago and far away, that Republicans talked about local control. Now, I haven't heard a Republican talk about local control since John Cawthorn took the Senate for the Republicans. Right now, on my desk here is Harry Truman's old plaque, The Buck Stops Here. Mm-hmm. With an election, they call the Secretary of State the highest election authority, but he's just not. Should he be? Should the buck with elections stop with the Secretary of State in Missouri?
Absolutely, because all of the county clerks and all the election authorities across the state are depending on that office to be the liaison between them and the legislature to ensure that Chapter 115...
Should the legislature pass laws that allow you to... I mean, right now, there's been voter fraud. It's just a truism. You don't have 100 counties where they move 10 votes or 1% of the vote. You have the big cities throughout this country, throughout history, where you could move 1% of the vote. It's 50,000 votes, and it skews an entire election. It's always been in urban areas. Right now, those are represented by Democrats. I don't think voter fraud's partisan. It's just who's in power in an urban area does the fraud. It used to be Republicans, Tammany Hall, different ones. But in this state, Democrats run that. Jay Ashcroft, Jason Kane, they've all gotten grief for the way St. Louis runs their elections, but you have no power to do much about it. Should the law be changed where the buck stops at the Secretary of State's office, and if there's voter fraud in St. Louis, it would be on you?
Well, we already have the ability now for the Secretary of State to subpoena and look into issues of voter fraud. So I would have to say, and that actually sunsets in 2025, and I think we need to extend that because the Secretary of State does need the ability to subpoena and look into issues of voter fraud.
And, you get to know Jay Ashcroft. Jay Ashcroft is not as partisan as he is passionate. Some of the stuff is generally Republican partisan issues, but I don't get the sense that's why I think he means them. I have, and to prove of that, I have not seen him abuse the power of that subpoena. I don't remember a case where he subpoenaed someone and people were like, well, that's just you looking for a headline. Well, that's ridiculous. I think he's used that power pretty responsibly.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say here in St. Charles, when I've talked to people about how voter fraud could happen, there are ways around it. I could explain it. I'm not going to, simply because I don't want to give anyone any ideas, but I could explain how it could be done here in St. Charles County, how it could be done in St. Louis County, how it could be done across the state. And some of the ideas that I've actually thought about proposing in the legislature would help curtail that and have more confidence in our elections process by the people.
All right, let's talk about your the caucus that would be passing that those election reforms or extend that sunset. You wrote a letter to your caucus,
Mm-hmm.
basically saying that you felt like the Speaker Dean Plocker should step down, and I'm greatly. It was actually an extremely articulately written article, but it goes into misuse of taxpayer funds. It talks about that. It talks about issues with his staff. I guess the chief clerk is actually the staff of the entire house, but his personal staff. Let's just walk through here.
Mm-hmm.
You brought up some issues with HRCC and some questions about that. But to me, you're going to have a caucus meeting. I guess it's on Thursday, sometime midday, I assume.
Correct.
Um, in that caucus, you've had freshman Representative Maisie Boyd come out and say he should resign. You've had Chris Sander. I don't think Representative Boyd is known as a supporter of the speakers, and Chris Sander, I'm not sure Chris is a supporter of anybody for very long. And you have Doug Ritchie running for Senate. You're running for Secretary of State. Why did you feel the need to write this letter to your colleagues?
I sat there long and hard and thought about what it meant. Everything that's happened from the fireside allegations with the emails with the clerk to.
I like to break these down
Okay.
because I think there is a very when Dean Plocker was on this very program, I mean, he admitted he made a mistake, but with Fireside, I mean, Fireside's a legitimate company used by several Missouri members of Congress, several
Yeah.
people that there's no, I missed the part here, and maybe that's going to come out in this investigation. I just haven't seen it. But if you thought, well, there should be software that helps you better track your constituents. I mean, that is not inherently, it's not like Dean owns the company. Inherently, wanting better software on its own is not anything bad, right? You don't have to win the argument.
The issue here is not the actual Fireside software. It's the emails that I've learned about between Speaker Plocker and the chief clerk and the potential violations of law there. So that's the issue that I have.
Public?
What's that?
Are those public information, those emails?
I have, from everything that I've heard, and that's why I choose my words carefully here.
Sure, no. It's the kind of situation where responsible people choose their words carefully. I get you on that.
Yeah, I'm told that it has been sunshined, and the quotes that were reported from Dana Radman Miller, where her job was threatened, that is a very serious allegation on its own.
Would it be wrong for you to threaten her? I mean, you're a member. You represent 40,000 people in St. Charles County. If you didn't like the way she was doing her job, it's kind of on you to raise that point, right?
Exactly. However, I don't have the power to fire her in my capacity as a representative. The speaker does have a higher authority than just a regular member of the House.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because these details do matter. And I guess, when Dana got the job, she was a very logical person to get it. I don't think I've ever even questioned much she's done outside of the wardrobe, whatever the hell that was a few years ago. I guess she has a reputation you just don't question, but I do think that she works. You would have to. The entire House elects her, right? Is selected. It's not just the speaker. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So threatening to withdraw support is aggressive, and I think probably most people view Dana as quite competent. So when that startled people, right? Because it's like, well, okay, wait a minute. She's not the type that would be you would normally think would have her job threatened, just because I've always thought of her as a pretty competent administrator. So that was surprising. But on the software on its own, I have a hard time. I understand there was some Democrats who tried to make that into a nefarious thing, but I just kind of chuckled. I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting a better software system. And if you think the government wants better than the private sector, okay, fine. And apparently your caucus does. There's nothing wrong with that. And threatening to withdraw your support for the chief clerk. Well, if she's elected by the House, I mean, is there any circumstance you could withdraw your support? But that whole situation, to me, it seems a little marginal. The question that was raised, I did sunshine some of those emails. Right now, there's some question whether your staff works for you or works for the chief clerk. You have a staff person, correct? Your constituents this is a part-time legislature. You work during the interim, right?
Yeah.
Like a regular Missourian. If they call your office, you're not.
I'm in my office right now. I own a carpet cleaning business.
If they call your office into a 751 number, You don't answer it because you're working, as you should be, as the Constitution hopes you are. A staff person answers it, right?
Yeah.
I'll ask you the question: does that person work for you or the chief clerk?
They work for the chief clerk.
Who should that person work for?
They should work for me.
It's one of those things. It's so often in government, and I bet you in business it's the same way. I would have answered that question a month ago. Well, they work for Adam. He hired them. He fires them. He sets their expectations. Their job. He can get rid of them if he wants to. I didn't know that your rule said that you couldn't. That was that. I'll bet you. Give me an over under. You have 109 members, right, in your caucus? 108?
111.
111. Of that 111, I would say 70. If the number was 70, over under 70 knew that was the case. Uh-oh. Was the question so challenging, Kelton, that it disrupted the entire internet? Well, while we're sitting here, I will tell you right now, I'll put this up, this letter. I thought this, well, hopefully, why don't you try pinging him back? I actually think that this letter is a extremely eloquently written letter. I think that I've just always kind of rolled my eyes at the fireside thing. That just seems like Democrats. It seems like some staff that has clearly at war with the speaker, leaking some stuff to the Democrats to try to and effectively. It was effectively done. These people aren't. These are veterans at the Capitol. They're not stupid. I tend to think. All right.
Yeah. Oh, there we are.
Was the gambling reference enough for the FBI to shut us down? And if the FBI is listening, this is Kelton's sportsbook, not mine. I have nothing to do with this. I've told him it's a bad idea. He won't listen. All right. So if you'd asked me, does Adam Squadron staff work for Adam Squadron or the chief clerk? I would have said Adam Squadron. Now, apparently that's not the case if you read some of the details. Over under your caucus 2 months ago, when you left session, over under 70 had no idea their staff doesn't work for them. I'm here.
I'm not getting any volume.
We got any? What we got there? You got him off mute. Live TV here. Okay, well, text him maybe and see if you can get him to turn his on. But I think he's back. Now we're bringing Adam back in here. Adam, can you hear me now?
Yeah, sorry, I got a phone call and apparently it booted me, and then I could still see you, and I thought I was on, but I couldn't hear you.
I'm telling you, when I do these videos with Gussie, like when we go to accounting, we'll go get something to eat. Gussie inevitably will shoot a great shot, and I'll forget to put it on Do Not Disturb, and it'll call. He'll give me the big thumbs up about some ice cream he's having. He'll have it all over his face. He'll be cute as he can be. Every time we've done it great, when I get a phone call and I forget to put on Do Not Disturb. So back to my original question. If you'd asked me in the session, does Adam Squadron staff work for Adam Squadron or the chief clerk? I would have said Adam. Back in May, over under 70 of your colleagues thought their staff worked for them. I'd say over.
I'd say over.
So, I mean, that's one of those things where, I get it. You pass the rules, you're there, your family's there. It's a very good reason how all these things happen. But I think you may hear some people talk Thursday about, well, wait a minute, I didn't know this. This is not the way this should work. I'm with you. And if you want to fire your staff for whatever reason, okay. Now, there may be a very good reason why there was something to this fireside. There may be where there's smoke, there's fireside. But it just, to me, on the face of it, looks like this was the thing that brought up a whole bunch of other issues. Now, let's get into the one that actually I think does bite. You wrote about him using his taxpayer reimbursement 9 times for items that were paid with campaign funds.
Yeah.
And I don't know the numbers that he would agree to, but he did admit that was a mistake and he shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Do you believe that was maliciously done to pull $4,000 out of the state, or he just screwed up?
I can't speak to his mindset on that. All I can do,
Dean, if you had to guess, what do you think happened?
I couldn't tell you exactly what he was thinking when he did that. But what I can tell you,
some of your colleagues that I would say
for something,
maybe they did it. If it was you, a businessman from St. Charles, I would say if something like this happened, I would say Adam Squadron made a mistake. Would be where I would start off from. Now, some of your colleagues, might not be as quick. But if I read this about you, I'd be like, oh, damn, he made a mistake. I would be very confident that you did not intentionally try to swindle $4,000 out of the state. I wonder yourself, do you think this was a multi-layer 5-year plan to pull $4,000 out of the state? Or it's wrong either way. Doesn't make it better. But do you think it was a multi-year plan to pull $4,000 out of the state, or you just screwed it up?
I mean, either way you look at it, he screwed up.
Yeah.
Well, as leaders, we are held to a higher standard. As a leader of the leaders, he should be held to an even higher standard. And that's why I've only called for him to resign the speakership.
So you've not recalled for him to resign his seat in the House?
Correct. I am waiting for all the issues with the ethics committee to come out, and I will take their recommendation there. Even though in the past, the ethics committee, it's been unfortunate that I've already had to deal with this twice with an ethics committee report in my short tenure in the House. But there was one other time that I felt the ethics committee was not calling for enough of a punishment on a member. And so that's why I voted for expulsion on that member.
So tell me this, the ethics committee, a lot of people say, let me get out of this. Whatever they come up with, I'm fine with. That's not what you're saying. You're saying whatever they come up with, you'll read it. And if you agree with it, you'll go along. If not, you'll want harsher punishment.
Correct. But I am still willing to let him have due process, let the ethics committee do their report. But in the meantime, as speaker, this is not only a distraction for him, it's a distraction for the entire caucus, as well as the entire Missouri House and Missouri GOP.
Well, this is what I wanted to ask you. You had the closest House election last cycle, extremely close election. Presidential year, usually more Democrats come out and vote than do in an off year. You're a qualified man to discuss a swing district in this state. You referenced in your letter, you thought this would cost you seats. I just wonder if we went to St. Charles County, to one of the luxurious strip malls throughout St. Charles County, and we asked people who the Speaker of the House was, I think they might say Matt Gaetz, right? I don't think they would even know there was a Missouri Speaker or who the hell it was. Do you?
They may not know right now, but I guarantee you that the mailers and the pieces that will be sent out there will be linking whatever candidate is running for re-election in those swing districts to every issue that is happening here. I can 100% guarantee
and you're a
it. I've seen it in my own
man
election.
You're a qualified man to say what's going to stick, what's not going to stick. Do you think an issue about an office they're not familiar with, the person they've never heard of, you think that linkage will be effective?
If you're talking about the Speaker of the Missouri House of Representatives for someone running for the Missouri House of Representatives, that would 100% be used against us in the election season.
And used effectively.
Absolutely.
Interesting. So it comes down through here. You basically say you're fond of Dean, and you don't hope this hurts his legally or politically his career, but you want him to move along. Now, as we go through this, you think he should move along because of the distraction, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to a member that said, well, the ethics committee's meeting, there's no reason that they can't wrap with no other legislative business in reality between now and January. Why don't you let them do their work? We'll come back in January, and if it's bad enough, we'll boot him.
Well, we still have to set our agenda as a caucus on Thursday at the Winter Caucus, and I guarantee you that more time than not will be used discussing this exact issue. I could see us having to schedule a second Winter Caucus to determine what are issues that we plan on doing in 2024 on the legislative floor.
Let me guess. You're going to do guns, abortion, something with gay people. What else?
Oh, there's plenty of other issues out there that we can work on besides just those.
Well, but I have watched some sessions of the Missouri House, and let me just take a pull from my sign of knowledge. If I was a betting man, as Kelton is, I'm going to step on a limb here and say, you're going to do something on guns, something on not wanting gay people to smile, and then something on abortion. It's just a wild guess based off 20 years of past precedent.
Yeah, don't forget about initiative petition reform.
Hey, yeah, tell me that. I always think there's 163 votes in the House for initiative petition reform until you have to decide on what you're going to change it to. Mm-hmm. Can you get that done?
We got it done in the House last year. It just died in the Senate after.
Yeah, but I mean, can you get one done that the Senate can you actually get a bill passed? I mean, that's you could pass a lot of things with the House. It's the House agenda seems to be not that hard to pass, right? You have 111 members. Mm-hmm. You could tell 30 of them to take a bus to Columbia for the day, and you could still pass whatever you wanted. Um, Tell me, can you actually get something the Senate can take, and can the Senate get something you could take? And I mean, is that is the thought of well, so today there's an election in Ohio. So at first, the Ohio pro-choice folks came in for a small thing and won big. Now they're coming for a much bigger thing in Ohio. If they win today in Ohio, will that scare your caucus and the Senate caucus into passing IP reform?
I don't believe so because Ohio is Ohio and Missouri is Missouri, and
Kind of similar though.
what we had out of conference committee was considerably different than what they have in Ohio. And so, what I see with initiative petition reform is yes, we need to make it harder to amend the Constitution,
Yeah.
but we also need to make it harder for the legislature to change initiative petition on the statutory level. Because
Well,
you
that's
take
a
a look,
great point. That is
you
a
take a
great
look
point.
back at the history, and that is why everyone is going for constitutional measures, is
Yeah,
because the
the puppy
legislature
mill
can
thing.
come back the next year and change any statutory IP measure.
You know, that's a very good point. My buddy Rich Callahan brought up the same point that it does feel like I think most fair-minded people think it should be harder to amend the Constitution,
Yeah,
but a provision put in statute by the people should be harder to change at the legislative level. What would a veto override majority on a statutory measure be fair to you?
absolutely. I
Well,
think,
that does feel like the right mix of the cocktail
yeah.
of making it harder to amend the Constitution, but making it hard to change a statutory provision enacted by the people. That really does feel like the right compromise. Can you get
And
that done?
failing, and if the legislature still gets over 50%, but not above the 67 or even 75%, then I would also argue it needs to go back to a vote of the people to see if they determine that those changes need to be made.
Um, yeah. I mean, what you laid out to me makes more sense than anything I've heard. Now, maybe other people have said this. I don't know. But what you laid out, you're giving both. It's the kind of thing you could take to Senator Rizzo, sit down in his office, a reasonable man, and say, well, what about this? You know, giving everybody something. That just seems like the kind of thing I think he could get the Democrats to sit down on. The difference, I think, in the Senate, though, can you take that to your senator, Bill Eigel? And now MRL has previously had they have another way to make it harder that I'm not smart enough to understand. But um uh can you get past them on that?
Are they a voting member of the Senate?
Sometimes, or well, I guess if I was a voting member of the Senate, this is the thing. I was so grateful for Susan to coming in because on this governor's endorsement, I honestly think I watched Bill Eigel carry a lot of water for them. A lot of water. I mean, a lot of water, like Lake St. Louis amount of water. And they endorsed Jay Ashcroft. And they didn't even call him. I was a little surprised by that. Will other people there be like, hey, wait a minute here. Nobody carried more water than Bill Eigel for them. Nobody. And they didn't even call him when they didn't endorse him. Mm-hmm. Is that going to make them less apt to go carry water for him?
I couldn't tell you what they plan on doing or what they plan on not doing, but I can just speak to everything that I plan on doing and everything that happened this last session and hopefully what will be this next session.
Okay, give me a prediction here since we're gambling. Will Dean Parker be Speaker of the House in January?
I'll know more after Thursday, but
we're talking Tuesday. We're just sitting here.
With the conversations I've had with people, I believe that he will not be Speaker come next session.
Interesting. Your colleagues ready to unite behind Speaker Patterson? We're going to have some kind of Washington mess. Not a Tim Brinker, Franklin County one, but like a Washington, D.C. mess here in Missouri.
We as a caucus already had the vote at veto session for the Speaker designee on Patterson. He won that race, and I would imagine the people would want to install him then as the Speaker. I think that would give the House a little more power having a Speaker serving 3 terms, kind of like what happened with Speaker Richardson.
How far down the line do you go there if you've messed up your expense reports? How far down the line of resigning is it just elected leadership? Should the chair of the conference, if Mike Henderson's ever sent a bad report, is it go down to chairman? How far down do you think you should step out of a position if you've messed one of these up?
I think you have to take a look at the whole situation. With Plocker, what we have here are 9 separate times over 5 years. I can understand
Let's say the chairman of the Eco Devo committee had 7 over 7 years.
Well, then that
So you got to
that is
go.
a major problem with that person, and I would question their leadership capabilities if they can't keep simple paperwork in order, such as that.
Interesting. Interesting. It's going to be I think you'll have an interesting Thursday. Before we let you go, two things here. Want to thank folks. Got to thank my buddy Chip here in town. Give me this beautiful. You'll recognize this as a St. Louis guy. This beautiful Bavarian architecture here at the Bush's Inn. Terrific Stein. Thank you, buddy. Let me just ask you a question. If you come to town and somebody's going to meet you, and you're like, "Oh, I'll pick you up," and they don't say the Courtyard, I mean, it's just a JV effort, right?
Exactly. It's a great location. The facilities there are top notch, and I enjoy going to any event there.
All right. So also United Fiber every year unites folks in cities vote to spend money on rural broadband, which we appreciate. Not enough some days. United Fiber is doing it right up in Savannah. If you ever get to Curious, and when you're on, now that you're touring the states, you got to get to the great Northwest. Go up and check out United Fiber. They'll be glad to show you around. You're going to feel better about that money you spend on rural broadband representatives if you go up and check out their operation. Jim and the folks do a great job up there.
I
Also,
already have
Kelton's
many
illegal
good
sports
friends
book.
up there.
Kelton's illegal sports book he has that, in case the cops are listening, is all Kelton. So Kelton, there was no. I actually took Georgia that didn't cover. You took Mizzou to win, so I think you still owe me $10 somehow in this. Representative, the line is 1. We know what Homer Kelton's going to do. He's going to pick Mizzou. Mizzou could play the Chiefs, and he would pick Mizzou. The line is Tennessee gets a point at home. What do you say? Who wins?
I think Mizzou is going to handle Tennessee. You take a look at what they've already done this year. They lost to Florida, and the only other ranked team they played, Alabama. Alabama took them down easily. I think it was 14 that they beat them by. So Mizzou's ranked. I have to take Mizzou winning outright.
When it's 1 point, I feel like the jerk every week here. This black I'm wearing, I guess, signifies the whole situation. I think we lose to Tennessee, then we close out the year with 2 wins. That's where my money's at. I think we handle Florida, and I think, of course, we beat Arkansas because, I mean, most of the players are related, and as were their parents. So I think that'll be. I feel good about that, but I worry Tennessee is going to make a big last stand. They know there's if Mizzou goes 10-9-3, they've had a great season. If Tennessee doesn't go 10-2, they've had a terrible season. So I'm interested to see how that it turns out. But I'll be the asshole again, Kelton. I mean, he's the representative. Of course, he's going to pick Mizzou. You're supposed to pick the other team. I'm look like the good guy tiebreaker. Instead, thanks, buddy. Jerk. He's wearing a sock hat today, like some kind of hipster. And I wasn't even going to point that out, except for he pulled another dick move on the bets on your own sports book.
It's only 1 point, and it's at home.
Well, also, Adam, your business could sponsor the sports book, just whatever. I just put it out there.
All righty.
But hey, let's
I've
talk.
co-sponsored the bill.
Let's talk before we go out. There's an issue that is probably is more emotional than stuff we talked about here. You've been an outspoken proponent of Israel. You've helped author some of the letters that have been co-signed by many of your colleagues. Tell me right now, what's happening in Israel on the ground today?
It's just a sad situation all around. What happened on October 7th was an absolute travesty. And what I see happening here in Missouri and around the nation and around the world, the response to Israel defending themselves after getting absolutely blindsided on October 7th. It's very sad. It's very disappointing. But as I tweeted out the other day or posted on X, however you want to say it, knowing that I have the support of my colleagues in the House, knowing that the senators on the Republican caucus on the Senate, that they had a letter of support for Israel, that makes me feel better about this state. Also knowing that we're the home of Harry Truman, who recognized Israel's existence just minutes after they declared it. It's just a whole
Harry Truman. I always go down for a Harry Truman shout out.
Bipartisan shout out there.
So, but let me ask you a question. Just us talking here. I got to tell you, I grew up in a place where I didn't know anybody was Jewish. I didn't even know people had a problem with Jewish people, if you want the truth. I just didn't know. If you grow up where I grew up, I didn't know anybody I didn't know anybody that was Jewish, and B, I didn't know anybody had a problem if they were Jewish. You grow up with a bit of a blinder. Tell me, as an American, I have been stunned. Now, I'll be honest with you. You know me. I like to tell a joke. I like to slap you on the back, and we've all heard jokes about Germans, Jewish people, but I had a sense it was mostly people in good fun that wouldn't tell the joke if they weren't around people they loved. And I'll be honest with you. I never thought much about hearing them or whatever, but I'll be candid. I've been stunned at the anti-Semitism. I guess my question is, have you been surprised? Because you could have knocked me with a feather to see the things happening in our country to people just because they're Jewish. I guess not growing up around seeing that, is it surprising to you?
It is not, because I've grown up with the reality. I remember going to temple as a kid and looking at the window and seeing a little hole in the glass and not realizing that was a bullet hole from some random person going by.
What is this hatred from? I guess to me, it just coming from the very rural part of the state I'm from. As I got older, you'd hear a joke or two, and you just laugh it off, like you tell a joke about hillbillies or whatever. And it was in my view, mostly all told in good fun. I never heard anybody truthfully, and I guess in Southern Missouri, there's an evangelical group like the family I was raised in is very supportive of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, absolutely. There's no question supportive. It is shot. Where does this come from? Where does I get it. You want to tell a joke about a Jewish person here and there. I think at the time, nobody thought much about it. I think that's changing with the events happening in the world. But moreover, where does this come from?
I wish I could tell you, but it's been around since before I was born, before my grandparents. I mean, you look at the family tree that my father composed a while ago, and seeing the pogroms that my mother's side of the family fled in Russia, seeing some of my family members that died in the Holocaust, that died in the Hubershoot Death March, that died in the extermination camps. There isn't a Jewish person out there that doesn't have someone related to them, most likely that died in the Holocaust there. So
have you been, I mean, just seeing these images on television and, other countries, I don't know the makeup of other countries, but I've seen people I saw a video that AJ Mall put out, a guy I know personally, but I follow, it's, anymore we know more people from social media than we do from personal conversation, but I certainly know AJ. He put this video out of someone being harassed right in St. Louis, right at a place I've driven by 100 times in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is my ignorance. I was shocked. I never would have imagined that. I honestly thought at first it was one of those AI chat GPT things. I guess it makes you feel like, in a way, seeing something like that is good for people that don't pay close attention, to be like, okay, this is serious. This is not a joke. This is not a game. I was taken aback by seeing that. Right. I don't know if you've seen what I'm talking about. You can look him up on Twitter. AJ Moy's got it. It's on his feed. It was like a kick in the gut. It just was like it wasn't even real.
Well, I just got to say that one of the guests that you had on a few weeks ago is peddling the trash right now. Naveen, the way she has spoken in the past about Jews, about people like me on Twitter, and she says she regrets it, but I still see a pattern in her tweets, in her posts, that are absolutely vile and do nothing to bring peace to the area. It's as
Let me ask you a question about that.
It's as I've always said: if Israel were to lay down their arms, there would be no Israel. If the Palestinians or Hamas lay down their arms, there would be peace.
But let's be honest. I mean, I've in the same way you laid out an IP reform plan that I think actually makes sense. The Palestinians have issues they've raised. Not all of them are insane, cutting off the heads of babies issues. There's a legitimate negotiation to take place. It just seems to be very, very clear that Hamas isn't the people that can do that negotiation. I mean, I think even you would say some of the settlements, well, you can argue that they're justified. I think you can also argue that the opposite point by some of the accords that Israel signed aren't justified. But damn, a settlement, is that really worth killing everybody at a music festival?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I mean that's the part where
If you truly want peace, you would talk first instead of just coming across and murdering every man, woman, and child and taking hundreds of hostages and
well, let's talk
raping.
about the end game here. There's no way that I see that interviewing two different people back to back and hearing their passion and their perspective. There's no way this gets the only way there's any this wouldn't be peace, but the only way the area calms down is Israel comes in, blows up enough of Gaza that they can fill these tunnels with cement and makes them afraid to do this again. I mean, that just seems like the only real solution here. And that's not peace, but that just seems like the only way this conflict ends is Israel literally blowing up a huge chunk of Gaza and filling in the tunnels with cement. Am I wrong?
When we say never again, we mean never again.
I just don't know. You could talk about negotiated humanitarian on, and that's fine. And in a theoretical world, that seems wonderful. But in reality, I just don't see it. I just see there's only one side has to crush the other. I don't think anybody believes that Hamas can crush Israel. They can do these terrorist attacks. And I think that at the end of the day, I would not be surprised for Hamas to have military installations under hospitals. I mean, these are people that did a legitimate, by every definition, terrorist attack. I just don't. I don't know that I mean, that's the only way this situation calms down is Israel does whatever they feel they need to do in Gaza, right? I don't see any other avenue out of this, right?
I agree with you completely.
Well, I tell you, I appreciate coming on. Good luck with Secretary of State's race. Good luck Thursday. I guess I don't think you'll see that many people smiling on their trip to Jeff City Thursday morning. As the situation in Israel unfolds, hopefully you'll come back and visit with us here on This Week in Missouri Politics.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Adam Schwadron. I tell you, it comes down to me. I've told you before. Obviously, there's a crew of people that have that member button on, right? And they have a perspective, and there's a club. You can cover it. You could work in it. You can be a staffer. You can be a lobbyist. You're not in the club until you have one of those pins. And even after you don't have one of those pins, and your pin's no longer valid, there's a kinship among those elected officials. They have a very unique lives. We all project and people malign them and stuff, but it's a very tough life to lead. And the fact of the matter is, he talks to people on a different level than I do. But the folks I've talked to, intent does matter. If I had to guess, he didn't say, but I don't think Adam Schwadron thinks Dean Plocker intentionally swindled $4,000 out. I do think his point is it doesn't matter, which is a valid point also. I mean, it's, again, you can have your opinion, I can have mine, but the only opinion that matters is the opinion of the people. There's 111 people in that room. So I guess to his point, well, he didn't say, I guess the better argument, his letter that he wrote to his constituents is probably the best argument I've heard for someone wanting to remove the speaker. I think his letter was taken not as forceful as it would have been otherwise because he's running for statewide office, and there's always going to be those that question, are you doing this for ambition and attention? And so no matter what you do in politics, your motives are impugned. That's just reality, common sense. In this case, I think that his letter was very well written, very articulate. I would say that it's a different point of did you, if he's saying the intent doesn't matter. And the truth is, you could have your opinion, I can have mine. The only opinion that's going to matter are those legislators that are going to meet on Thursday. My gut is a little bit still that they're going to get in that room and two things. Another thing, and the reason I think he has credibility is this. If you're going to come in that room and say, okay, our staff should work for the chief clerk and Dean should go, people are going to think, oh, you're on the side here. If you split that baby, that's probably the argument that's going to carry water. My prediction, just from what I'm hearing, is members are going to change that. And again, I don't know that Dana did. I don't think there's anybody saying she did something particularly untoward or unprofessional. I think that's just the way that whatever, probably at some conference, somebody said that rule works well here, so they tried it here. I don't think anybody even knew that was in the rules. And again, that's not on her. That's on the people that voted for it. So I think they may change that. As far as the speaker go understand, again, I'm kind of walking into Thursday. I'm sort of where I was before. My gut tells me that he's going to have a hard time, but still run for lieutenant governor. or have a hard time running for lieutenant governor, but be speaker. But anytime you make a mistake, you're a little weaker. And I think that's probably what they're looking at now. I think they're going to make some staff changes. If they don't, then he deserves his fate. You're going to have to you have to get it. You could say you had a rough staff once, then get it right. And if you screw it up twice, then people just start throwing their hands up. So my gut tells me he makes some moves to get his staff, whether that's good or bad or whatever. But I've been a staffer. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. They care, and as they should. You rise and fall with the guy that's elected. Those pins in that club, they come with a level of communication, come with responsibility. So we'll see. Going to have Representative Jamie Berger, Chad Perkins on This Week in Missouri Politics on Sunday. We'll see. We'll get a featured guest here in a minute after. It's just hard for me to get guests when Kelton makes me look so damn bad on the betting. People don't want to come on because if I bet against Mizzou. So anyhow, we appreciate you watching. We'll see you back here next week on the Midweek Update, and we'll see you Sunday.